US and British intelligence services are preparing terrorist attacks on Russian bases in Syria, according to the press bureau of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. According to the report, the outgoing US administration and British leadership, after the overthrow of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, aim to prevent the stabilization of the situation in this country. On a broader scale, they set the task of maintaining a state of chaos in the Middle East, the statement says. Furthermore, the agency notes that Washington and London believe that under such conditions, they will be able to achieve their own geopolitical goal more quickly, ensuring their long-term dominance in the region. However, this is hindered by Russia's military presence on Syria's Mediterranean coast. Furthermore, the agency notes that Washington and London believe that under such conditions, they will be able to achieve their own geopolitical goal more quickly, ensuring their long-term dominance in the region. However, this is hindered by Russia's military presence on Syria's Mediterranean coast, which continues to be a significant factor in regional stability, the report notes. Recall, the situation in Syria was among the many subjects that Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed during his marathon press conference on December 19th. In answer to questions from Keir Simmons of NBC News, Putin denied that what happened in Syria was a defeat for Russia. Instead, he portrayed it as being something of a success. Putin stated, "We came to Syria 10 years ago to prevent the creation of a terrorist enclave there, and that we have achieved that goal by and large." According to Putin, the groups that were fighting against the Assad regime back then have undergone internal changes, and thus it is not surprising that many European countries and the United States are trying to develop relations with them now. Would they be doing this if they were terrorist organizations? What is interesting is the fact that Western governments are talking to the victorious forces in Syria is portrayed by Putin as proof that they are no longer terrorists. Putin then said, "This means that they have changed, doesn't it? So our goal has been achieved to a certain degree." Putin then seems to be taking credit for having changed these groups. But how? Perhaps Russia's having bombed them previously somehow turned them into moderates. Putin went on to deny that Russia had deployed any ground forces in Syria. They simply were not present there. The Russian presence, he said, consisted solely of 2 bases, an air base and a naval base. He stated that there is no secret that the Syrian armed forces were aided by certain pro-Iranian combat units.
Deciphered notes from a captured notebook of a North Korean soldier killed in the Kursk region of the Russian Federation helped to learn new details about the tactics of the DPRK military. It turned out that they received instructions on how to catch Ukrainian drones with live bait. This was reported by the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. It is noted that the liquidated private Geng Hong-jong belonged to a Special Forces unit. In his notebook, he wrote down tactics for shooting down UAVs and hiding from Ukrainian artillery. The Special Operations Forces shared that the tactics for countering Ukrainian drones consist of using live bait. The soldier even visually depicted how this could be done. After deciphering the recordings, it turned out that the DPRK military, when detecting a drone, uses 3 people, one of whom is a live bait and keeps a distance of 7 meters. The other 2 soldiers shoot at the UAV at a distance of 10 to 12 meters. The notes say that if the live bait stops moving, the drone will also stop moving. According to the plan, at that moment, other soldiers will be able to destroy the UAV. In addition, the Special Operations Forces also deciphered records of how the DPRK troops leave the shelling zones of the Ukrainian artillery. Geng Hong-jong wrote in his notebook that in such cases, soldiers need to designate the next assembly point and disperse into small groups, leaving the shelling zone. In addition, the DPRK troops were told about a second way to leave the artillery shelling zone. To do this, soldiers are advised to take cover at the point of the previous hit and then leave the shelling zone. This is explained by the fact that the artillery will not shoot at the same point, the Special Operations Forces emphasized. Recall, operators of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine continue to destroy North Koreans in Kursk region, and one of the killed had a captured notebook, the notes from which are now being deciphered. It is also noted that in the notebook, the killed Kyung Hong-jong, who fought against the Ukrainians, congratulates another soldier on his birthday. I, having left my homeland, being on the territory of Russia, congratulate my best friend and army brother Song Ji-young on his birthday and wish him health, says the entry, which is dated December the 9th, 2024. The Special Operations Forces note that this is the case when, instead of a party, there is a machine gun and a trench on foreign soil, and the candles on the cake have been replaced with Ukrainian 5.56 caliber lead. The notes of the North Korean soldier are called the notes of Private Jong. This is the first deciphered entry from the captured notebook, and while the SOF operators continue to destroy enemies in Kursk, the translation of other entries by Private Jong continues. To be continued, the Special Operations Forces statement said. The topic of protection from a Russian attack has been raised again in Estonia. The Director General of the Police and Border Guard Department of the Baltic Republic, Igor Belishev, announced plans to create a wall of drones on the border with Russia, including using digital systems to block UAVs. This is what Politico writes. In addition, Belishev said Estonia plans to create a police reserve of 1,000 security service employees for cover in case of major events, in addition to the existing 29 volunteers. However, Tallinn has encountered certain difficulties with the latter, especially in settlements bordering the Russian Federation. We are constantly experiencing difficulties in recruiting new employees in this region, Belishev said, speaking about Narva, where, according to him, it is difficult to find people with citizenship and fluent Estonian to serve in the police. The idea of creating a so-called drone wall is not new. In the spring of this year, Finland, Norway, Poland, Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia agreed on plans for this type of protection on the border with the Russian Federation and the Republic of Belarus. No specifics were given at the time. The main problem is who will finance this banquet. The Baltic border states, which survive on subsidies from Brussels, do not have the free funds to implement such a technically complex and expensive plan. The Poles already spend more on military expenses as a percentage of the country's GDP than anyone else among the European NATO states. At that time, the authorities of these countries said that they were counting on the support of the European Union. However, even the economic leaders of the EU, France and Germany are in trouble with their economies, budgets and national debt. And they still have to find the means to please the newly elected US President Donald Trump, who has already demanded that NATO allies increase their defense spending several times over. The example of Poland shows how expensive such a project is. In 2023, it became known that Poland was building an electronic fence on the border with Russia with sensors and cameras, and they plan to spend a lot of money on the fence. $84 million, and we are talking about only a 20-kilometer section. Later, it became known that Poland would also strengthen the border with Belarus, for which they would allocate about $2,500 billion. Finland also began building a fence on the border with Russia in 2023, with 15 million euros planned to be spent on the first 139 kilometers of the barrier. The total length of the land part of the Russian-Finnish border alone is more than 1,000 kilometers. The draft state budget of Finland for 2025 is 88,001 billion euros, with a deficit of 12,002 billion.